and welcome to the Actual Tech Media EcoCast. My name is Jess, and I am excited to be here with you all today. But before we jump into our content, I have some basic information that I want to cover with you. All right, let's kick off our day here today by taking a quick tour of your audience console. And we're going to start with the questions window. So if you haven't already said hi, there is a whole audience of cool humans out there, so reach out and give a wave to the other members of the Actual Tech Media community. Now, keep in mind that if you do have any technical issues today, a browser refresh is going to fix just about anything. But if those tech gremlins are clinging on today, no problem. Just throw a comment in the question section and our crew will be there to help. We also want this to be an informative webinar for you, so throughout today's EcoCast, we hope you'll get engaged and ask all your burning questions. Not only will we have team members responding to you over a live chat, we will also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of our presentations. Now, if we don't get to your question during the live webinar today, don't worry, because the awesome experts that we have here with us will be following up after we wrap. All right, next up, there's going to be lots of cool aha moments on the EcoCast today, and if you want to share those with your community, we've made it nice and easy for you. You can use the Twitter button right there on your audience console, and the hashtag for today's EcoCast will be automatically added to your post. All right, our last stop on this guided tour, be sure to check out the handouts tab for some awesome resources and takeaways from our speakers here today. We have an info pack collection, solution briefs, white papers, data sheets, free trials, ebooks, upcoming webinars, and more. So many great resources, so be sure to go explore. Now, if that wasn't enough fun, we also have some exciting prizes that we'll be giving away throughout today's EcoCast. I'm going to tell you a bit more about those later on, but a few quick reminders for you all. First, you do need to be here live in attendance at the EcoCast in order to qualify to win a prize, and we will follow up with all of you after we wrap. Now, all winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. Now, if you don't know what those full T's and C's are, that's fine. We've got the full thing for you. Just head on over to that handouts tab, click in, scroll down to the bottom, and you'll find them waiting for you there. Now, the absolute most important thing to remember is that we love getting all your insightful questions during these live webinars. In fact, we love it so much that we actually have a special additional prize for all you inquisitive folks out there. So in today's EcoCast, we will be giving away a prize for the best question asked in each of our live sessions. Now, the expert speakers and teams will review all questions asked after we wrap the webinar, which means that even if your question does not get read out in a live session, there is still a chance to win. If you are a lucky winner here today and you would like to donate the value of your prize, we have several wonderful organizations that we partner with. So let us know when we follow up about your big win, and we'll get that rolling for you. Again, we are so happy to have you all here with us live at the EcoCast today, and we want to keep that good feeling going, so let's connect on social media. Reach out and connect with Actual Tech Media on Twitter and on LinkedIn. We have lots of great content, and we always want to hear from you. Now, if you're looking for more awesome content and resources right after we wrap the EcoCast today, be sure to subscribe to the Actual Tech Media channel on YouTube. Another fun way to win a prize and, hey, grow this awesome community is to refer an industry friend or a coworker to the Actual Tech Media webinar series. Now, you'll find a link to do that right in your handouts tab, and you will also be automatically redirected at the end of the webinar. And both you and your coworker or friend could win a prize, and we hold those drawings every month. So be sure to refer a friend, because it could quite literally be a win-win situation. Next, we have a cool opportunity for all the decision makers out there to get connected with new and emerging tech and innovative vendors. Here's how it works. All you need to do is click on the link in your handouts tab, fill out a quick application, and the Actual Tech crew will then match you with some vendors that we think you should probably be chatting with based on your needs. There will also be fun opportunities that you get to choose to join in, like surveys, test runs, new solutions, extended demos, and so on. You'll get some chances to win extra prizes, you'll chat with great people, and you'll learn about the hottest new trends in tech. So be sure to apply, or hey, send that link to a decision maker on your team. Now, I want to take a quick minute here to remind you all about one of my favorite resources, and that is ransomware.org. You can find out everything you need to know about ransomware, how to prepare, prevent, and recover. This site is jam-packed with information, helpful tips, checklists, strategic approaches, case studies, everything you need in one place. So wherever you are in your ransomware preparedness journey, there is something for you at ransomware.org. Go check it out and start exploring. All right, I have one more exciting resource I have to tell you about today, and that is the Gorilla Guide Book Club. It's going to give you access to free enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts, so you can stay up to date on trending enterprise technology. And yes, these books will work on your Kindle, your mobile device, and as I said, they are completely free. You can download these awesome resources at gorilla.guide, and there's a link for you in that handouts tab as well. All right, well, we have covered a lot of important things already, and I don't know about you all, but I am excited to dive in. So let's get going. All right, folks. Well, it is time to jump into the good stuff, because today we are here to talk about defending the public sector and education against ransomware, special considerations. And I am so excited to be here with you all today for this conversation, because I really love when we get to take these deep dives into a specific industry and explore those needs, those challenges, those opportunities that are available to you or that you might be facing. So today is all about public sector and education and what you need to have on your radar when it comes to ransomware. And to help us navigate this conversation, we have two top experts here with us from Rubric and Sophos. I cannot wait to jump in, so I'm going to get this show on the road pretty quickly here today. Now, again, my name is Jess Steinbach. I'm a moderator here at Actual Tech Media. I am joined today by my fellow moderator, Scott Becker, who's waiting in the wings with a fun keynote chat for us all, as well as Keith Ward, who is here with us today on live chat. Now, last but not least, before we get into the content here today, let's talk about prizes. So today on the EcoCast, you could win one of three $300 Amazon gift cards. Now, we are going to be giving those away to three lucky winners here with us live and present at the EcoCast. And I mentioned this before, but the full T's and C's are waiting for you in the handouts tab if you do have any questions about those. All right, that's it. We're cruising things along at a fast clip here because we have lots to cover today. And I'm very excited to introduce our keynote speaker. Now, this is a familiar face here. And a fantastic way to start out our day. We are going to be chatting with Alan Liska, Senior Security Architect and Ransomware Specialist. Now, Scott and Alan are waiting here to guide us through an interesting conversation about ransomware, really in particular when we're talking about the risks and the awareness that you need to have in the public sector and education. So let's get things going. Scott, I'm going to hand things right on over to you. Take it away.
Alan, thanks for being here. It's always great to get your take on the latest with ransomware.
I'm excited to be here. I love talking to you, Scott.
So our event today is about ransomware attacks and defense in the public sector and, in the education sector. So the first thing that I think, a lot of people are wondering is what's the profile of organizations and other bad actors who are attacking public sector and education institutions right now? Is it any different from the profile of attackers sort of horizontally, or are there specifics?
So in general, what we're seeing with the public sector and education is, a lot of ransomware actors in particular love going after them. But anything that is data theft is considered, these two targets, education and public sector, are really ripe for anybody that is stealing data, because there's a lot of valuable data there. If you hit a local municipality, all of the information about the people in that town or city, is really valuable on underground forums and the sort of the resale market. Student data is really valuable, but also when you hit a school, you have teacher data, you have parent data, you have administrative staff data. So there's a lot of really valuable personal data there. So we're seeing a lot with anything in data theft and anything that can be held for ransom.
That's interesting. On the data theft side, are these actors making money, independently of the ransom from, selling the data?
Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why these targets are so valuable, is because you can hold the data for ransom, and if the school or the town refuses to pay the ransom, then you have a secondary market of being able to sell this data to people that specialize in identity theft or credit card fraud or whatever else, in underground forums. So basically, it's a two-income stream. And in fact, often even if you pay the ransom, they'll still go ahead and sell your data because, of course, cyber criminals have no moral conscience, and despite all their protestations that we would never do that, our reputation would be ruined. Yes, of course they will go ahead and do that. So
Yeah, there's no honor among thieves.
right, exactly.
Okay, so I understand there was some big news this week around federal efforts to defend educational institutions. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, actually, I know this has been planned. This conference has been planned for months, but the White House just had a summit on protecting K through 12, so protecting education, which has been a huge problem. Ransomware attacks in 2023 are probably going to surpass all of 2022 by the end of September. That's how bad it's been this year. We've had a number of record-setting months in terms of publicly reported ransomware attacks against the education sector. And so, the White House really wants to do something about that. And they're doing something that I think is really nice. They're doing a combination of public and private security initiatives. So, for example, CISA is involved, and they've got a number of pilot programs that they're working on, including over $20 million in grants that they're going to make available to schools to enhance their cybersecurity capability. But they also have Cloudflare, they have Amazon Web Services, and they have other private sector companies that are offering services and capabilities to the schools. So it's not just the government coming in and say, the federal government coming in and saying, this is how you're going to secure your school system. They're also saying, hey, here are some partners that are going to offer you services that the government will pay for, that the federal government will pay for, that'll help you improve the security of your school. Because every school district is a little bit different and has slightly different security needs. So I really like the fact that they're going with more of a sort of like a buffet option of, here are the things you can do. If you need federal assistance, here's how we can help. But if you just need private sector assistance, here are ways that we can help. And so I think that that's a really good approach, and something that, because we all care about protecting schools, until it comes time to, raise our taxes so that you can fund better cybersecurity in schools. Nobody ever wants to do that. So having services available for the schools to pick from will go a long way to help. And a lot of those services include training, which is one of the areas that school systems in particular really struggle with. Is you may be able to hire people, but they don't have the right training to properly protect against the sort of the onslaught of ransomware attacks.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, that all sounds really positive. And one of the things that you mentioned there was about, the 2023 numbers being so high, and so, we talked about this a little before, just, that we're sort of like 4 years into this hyperactivity around ransomware. So everybody's had sort of like 4 years to get ready. What's your sense of like the state of preparedness? You talked a little bit about education already, so maybe let's switch gears to just public sector in general. Like how hardened are public sector systems, with sort of this lead time, to get ready for ransomware? How do they compare sort of to the IT industry as a whole, and sort of to the scale of the attacks that they're seeing?
Yeah. So, talking about public sector, separate from education, so far in 2023, we at Recorded Future have tracked 122 publicly reported ransomware attacks against cities, towns, and tribal entities. That is on track to surpass 2022 numbers. So despite all of the warnings and kind of all of the awareness of the problem, it still continues to be a problem, and a lot of that has to do with resources. If you're a small or medium town, you can't really afford to hire a cybersecurity staff, or if you can, you're underpaying them. compared to the industry average, and you're probably going to lose them in a couple years as they kind of go off to bigger and better things. But even large towns, I mean, this year we've seen Dallas get hit with ransomware. We've seen Oakland get hit with ransomware. So even big cities are still vulnerable to these kind of attacks. And it's because there are so many different threat actors right now. I mean, we're currently at Recorded Future, we're currently tracking more than 100 different active ransomware groups. And that's just ransomware. Think of all the other different threat actors out there, all of whom are trying different ways of gaining initial access. And because cities have to be so accessible, because city networks have to be so accessible, they are pretty ripe to attack, unfortunately.
Yeah. And the other thing I always like to ask you about is, I know you guys keep close track of ransomware payments themselves, publicly reported payments, and who's paying and how much. What are the trends? So what are you guys seeing in both public sector and education as far as how often people are paying and where the ransom demands and the payments are trending?
Yeah. So what's interesting about both education and the public sector is they tend to be among the least likely to pay. There have been a couple of high-profile payments. So Hawaii Community College paid a ransom recently, and then St. Mary's in the UK paid a 290,000 US dollar ransom. But most of the time they don't pay. And unfortunately, that can lead to a lot of pain. I mean, you don't have to look any further than the Minneapolis public school system to see all of the potential damage in the data that was leaked by these ransomware groups. Not just personal data from students, so not just the things that we normally think of, Social Security numbers, date of birth, etc., but counseling records, disciplinary actions, and the ransomware actors, in particular, when we talk about schools, are very aggressive about not just going after the school administrators for not paying, but also going after parents, going after students themselves, sending them emails saying, hey, this is what I'm going to release about your student if you don't tell the school system to pay. And so they can get incredibly personal and incredibly aggressive in doing that. And you and I have had this conversation, and and I hope I can say this, it just pisses me off how sanctimonious they get when they're emailing the parents and saying, it's almost like abuser language, where the school won't pay us, our extortion demand, and so it's their fault that we're going to release this really sensitive data about your kid. And it's why I want to punch every single one of them when if I ever meet any of them. Sorry to end on such an aggressive note, but
well, Alan, it's always a pleasure to hear bad news from you about about the ransomware world. Really appreciate your time and really appreciate all the work that you're doing out there to help people deal with this.
No problem. I'm excited for the conference. I hope that it turns out to be a really good one, and looking forward to the other talks today.
Me too. All right. Well, let's get to those.
Well, I agree. There's no one else who can deliver bad news with such a great laugh behind it. So I do always appreciate hearing from Alan. And yeah, I think that this is a great example of those conversations that help us work through some of those challenges that can sometimes feel a bit on the scary or overwhelming side. And then we sit down and we talk solutions, and that's what we're here for today. So on that note, we have a question for you. We are wondering, what is your time frame for adding new or updating existing IT solutions at your company? So we're talking about ransomware today. Are you guys in urgent straits? You really need to have these solutions a little bit closer to home in the next couple of weeks or months? Or are you thinking maybe a little longer term, maybe second half of the year, or looking even further out a year or so down the line? So no wrong answers here. No one's going to judge you if you need something immediately. All we're doing is trying to make sure that we're getting you the information in the timeline that you need it in. So let us know what your urgency is and where you're at in that process. All right, so I'm going to keep things moving along, though, because we have some great sessions to get into. As Scott and Alan just alluded to, there is a lot to cover today and a lot that we are going to learn. So let's get into our first session. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce you to our very first expert presenter in today's interesting EcoCast. And we are definitely starting out strong because we have the Rubric crew here to kick us off. I'm very happy to introduce you all to Danny Page, Inside Sales Engineer at Rubric. Danny, thank you so much for being here to get us started today. Now, I know you have some great stuff planned for the audience. We want to leave some time for audience Q&A. So I'm going to hand things on over to you. Take it away, Danny.
All right. Thank you so much. Much appreciated. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Once again, Danny Page, Inside Sales Engineer over here at Rubric. We're going to go ahead and get things kicked off. Talk about cyber recovery and how that's different from what we consider standard backup and recovery, right? So to level set for just a moment here, when we talk about backup, most organizations out there, pretty much every organization out there, cities, school districts, hospitals, commercial organizations, manufacturing, they all have some form of backup. But doesn't necessarily mean that we've got the ability to do an effective cyber recovery in the event that we get hit by ransomware, right? So let's kind of talk about why and talk about why Rubric is not just your standard backup and recovery and what we are our cyber recovery experts. So it's no secret, right? We all either read the news, watch the news, listen to the news. So day in and day out, we're seeing organizations under attack. We're seeing cities, we're seeing utilities, we're seeing manufacturing companies, we're seeing ports, hospitals, all of those different types of organizations under attack, right? You cannot turn on the news without seeing some type of new ransomware that has been unleashed and has crippled some type of organization, and oftentimes it is cities, big, large, and small, or big, small, medium, and large, right? So how do we kind of think about that, right? So you'll see right here in parentheses, we are right there in quotes, we assume breach. You hear the term zero trust data protection a lot, right? What does zero trust mean? It means never trust, always verify. But we kind of take it a step further and we assume breach. Why is that? You see here that most organizations out there, they have a ton of perimeter security, right? Front end security is kind of the way that we like to think about it. Whether that be the network, whether that be application security, endpoint security, things like that. Yet these attacks still continue to happen. And what they're going after first and foremost is the data, right? They want the data. That's what's valuable. You just heard the keynote talking about that earlier, right? They want the data, whether that be to exfiltrate it, whether that be to sell it on the dark web, whether that be to turn up the heat on an organization for paying for encryption keys and paying a ransom. So, I mean, the data is the target, and the backup is also where the data lives. So obviously, it's going to essentially live in two different places. First and foremost, on the front end, that's what they want to breach first. That's the easiest place to get in, even with all of those front end protection measures in place. But they are now going after the backup targets, the backup repositories. So the data that lives in the backup, they want to encrypt the front end data and they want to delete the backup copies. So then you have to kind of start asking yourselves, is your data an easy target? So this is kind of what we see as a standard kind of legacy solution for backup, right? You typically have production servers protecting a number of things, running a number of things, whether those be your hypervisor virtual machines, your databases, your Microsoft applications, whether that be Exchange, SQL Server, maybe your M365 devices that live in the cloud. Those run on production servers on-prem, typically with a backup proxy, a backup server, backing up to some type of disk-based target, or maybe even tape. So this is the type of infrastructure and solution that is not designed for an adversary that's already behind a firewall. And this is why I used the term earlier where I talked about assuming breach, right? We want to make sure that your data is safe, even if we know that there's some type of adversary that's already behind the firewall and that's already breached that environment. So you have to ask yourself a few questions, right? Are you running open network protocols? So are you using those standard CIFS, NFS, SMB to either move your backups, to discover those backups? Is that leaving you open and vulnerable? Are you running anything on Windows, right? Are you using Microsoft operating systems to implant something? Because if there's a breach of the OS, then that means there's a breach of the backups and those can be deleted. And of course, are you using MFA and time-based one-time passwords to protect anyone actually accessing the interface itself? So we've got ways of getting in via the network, open protocols, breaching Microsoft, discovering a zero-day vulnerability. But there's also just credentials compromise. So are we using things like multi-factor authentication to make sure that nobody is breaching our credentials and getting inside the system itself and the interface? So you also have cloud workloads. This isn't just limited to your data center. These are things that we can solve for really no matter where your data lives, whether that be Microsoft Azure, whether that be AWS, Google Cloud, and your SaaS applications as well, your M365. So for this reason, we have to think, do we have backup or do we have the ability to do cyber recovery, right? So this is the way we're thinking about things now. We've got new questions to ask ourselves, right? First things first, what exactly do I recover in the event that I do get hit? Because if it's a ransomware event, they're going after your data, as we talked about. They're going after the production data to encrypt it, and they're going after the backups, likely to delete it. So if we've encrypted data and we're going through a recovery effort, we need to know what to recover, right? Because if we've got encryption in place, we don't want to go out there and recover something that's already encrypted and putting us back at square one. The other thing we need to ask ourselves is, do we have any sensitive data in scope? It's always something we want to know, right? If we knew that we had certain particular virtual machines, file systems that were actually breached, was there any sensitive data in there? And what kind of sensitive data was it? Was it HIPAA data? Was it CGIS data? Was it just personally identifiable information? Did I have credit card numbers that got exposed? So figure out exactly what kind of data it is, maybe who has access to that data, and if it might have been exfiltrated. And then also you need to understand if the malware is still sitting somewhere on a snapshot, on a recovery point in your environment, because this is another way in which you can put back to square one, right? You can either go in and recover already encrypted data, or you can simply recover non-encrypted data, but maybe there's some executable sitting there in the snapshot that's just waiting. That's just a ticking time bomb that you've just restarted. So, I mean, boards, city councils, they're now asking different questions. They're now prioritizing things a little bit differently. Are we good? Number one, are our backups safe? If we get a breach, are they going to be able to get to those backups? Are they immutable? Is there an air gap of some kind? Can you prove that? If we have a recovery effort, can you show me that we can do this? And then how long will it take? Because that's really, when it all boils down to that, that is the name of the game. How fast can we get back up and running, and how do we lose the least amount of data possible, right? So what we do here is we can do this with one single solution called the Rubric Security Cloud, now available for Rubric Security Cloud Government, or RSCG, as you'll hear me call it a lot. How it works, how we do all of the things that I kind of just talked about, is first and foremost, we can do things across all different types of workloads, whether that be the data center, workloads that you have running in the cloud, or your SaaS workloads. We have immutability and an air gap in place to make sure that the data is safe. So even if there is a breach, you've got immutable backups, so even an admin can't go in there and delete those backups. You also have an air gap in place. So if your production environment is breached, they're not going to be able to find their way or discover that backup system. So it's invisible to the network. They won't be able to find it, and everything is encrypted as well. And we're using metadata and time series data to essentially understand what a normal day, week, month looks like, and how changes might have happened that can help us determine and give us insight into how to make the most effective recovery effort work. So we can give you the modern data protection with all of those things related to an all-in-one infrastructure and interface. That keeps the backup safe with things like immutability, end-to-end encryption, logical air gap, retention lock, intelligent data lock. All of these measures that we put in place, most of which are native to the platform and cannot be turned off. We do encryption detection. This is something that, while a lot of vendors out there might have some form of anomaly detection, can they do encryption detection? Right? Do they understand which backups, which snapshots might be encrypted and which ones aren't? So essentially, how do we do a surgical recovery of some kind? And then sensitive data discovery. How do we know if those snapshots or if those workloads that were breached actually have sensitive data, which means that data might have been at risk to be exfiltrated, right? And what type of data is it? And then we can also do threat hunting and quarantining. Threat hunting is how we determine exactly what type of malware might have existed on a particular snapshot. How early did it actually enter our system, right? If we're taking backups frequently, typically most organizations are doing dailies of some kind. We can hop into a time machine and understand exactly when a particular malware entered our environment and which snapshots it actually infected and might still exist on. And when we figure that out, we can put those particular snapshots in quarantine, right? We want to make sure that they're not being used as a recovery point, whether that be a third party that we're working with. You know, a lot of times recovery effort is a big scramble. How do we figure out how to make that scramble more orderly by taking snapshots, putting them in quarantine, and making sure that nobody else within that recovery effort is inadvertently reintroducing malware into the environment? We can also do risk assessments, right? We can do things like forensics to an isolated recovery environment if we want to understand more about a snapshot itself that might have encryption on it or malware on it. And we can do disaster recovery testing too. So we can create blueprints that we put in place so that we've got a reared and ready to go recovery effort, because it's not just about kind of just rehydrating a bunch of snapshots all willy-nilly. We can go in and actually put an order in place as to exactly how we want that recovery effort to go down. And we can test those recovery efforts and build out reports so that we can provide proof as to how they're working, but also to help us patch up any holes that we might have related to the disaster recovery planning itself. So we do this all with Rubric Security Cloud for Government, available now. I'll kind of walk through some of the additions that we've got and kind of where we are with getting this fleshed out. This is a kind of a newer thing related to Rubric itself. So what benefits do you get with RSCG? Number one, you get the guaranteed ability to recover data, right? We've got immutability in place. The data will be there. It'll be ready to go, no matter what other tools you have in place. We've got a single system to protect on-prem, in the cloud, and the SaaS data. So you don't have to worry about multiple interfaces hopping back and forth. We use the single system, which intertwines a lot of tools and integrates a lot of tools so that the recovery effort is smooth and streamlined. We can test resiliency to reduce risk, right? So how resilient do we really think we are? We can create those blueprints, but also tie in the ability to use the data that we have related to, malware infection or encryption detection to make sure that we're covering the right snapshots, losing the least amount of data, and not reinfecting our environment. And we can get that practical visibility, data visibility, to drive that better decision making, right? So which snapshots are encrypted, which ones do we actually need to recover, which ones do we think was where did the first breach occur, and where is the sensitive data, where does that lie, so that we can make decisions effectively about our file systems, how we understand, do we need to provide identity services to any particular users that are out there? Do we need to report to any compliance organizations? How do we get the legal side figured out if we have sensitive data involved? And this also allows us to consolidate and repurpose existing budget, because we have so many tools in place. Was there, say, a sensitive data discovery tool in place for the front end that we might have been considering? Do we want to maybe take that and repurpose it down and consolidate it down to one single tool? Maybe malware infection is something that you were considering. Well, now you can, malware detection something that you were considering? Now you can kind of do this with that one single tool. Take that budget that you might have been considering for other things or already using for other things and put it into a single interface. And it's now designed for US government. So we've got a dedicated instance of this RSCG, the SaaS platform itself, for federal, state, and local agencies and contractors. We've got rigorous security monitoring and remediation, end-to-end encryption, whether that data be at rest or whether that data be in transit. So TLS 1.2 encryption for data in transit, and AES 256 encryption for any data that is at rest. Secure processing of data, all of it happens within the US. So everything CJIS compliant, eventually FedRAMP compliant as well. And then 24/7, 365 support by qualified US citizens that are located on US soil as well. This is kind of what timeline looks like for the way that we're ramping. We're going slowly, right? As it stands right now, those city governments, police departments, fully CJIS compliant, that's available now. FedRAMP moderate, that should be coming here probably October, is what the timeline is looking like right now. We'll have state ramp compliance by the winter, either December 23 or January 24. And then by the summer of next year, we'll be DoD compliant, right? We'll have that IL level 4, impact level 4 compliance sometime next summer. So kind of ramping things up slowly a little bit, but this is what that timeline looks like. You determine what is most important to you here. And then, we started out as a modern data protection company, right? We wanted to go and put time back in the backup admin's name, but from the very get-go, we had security in mind. So we've been securing government data for 9+ years now. When we started back in 2014, that includes the FDA, the Federal Reserve System, branches of the military as well. And one that I like to point out, because I'm here in the city of Austin, is we protect the city of Austin as well. So what you're getting with all this, outside of the things that I just talked about, obviously the zero trust architecture, right? Never trust, always verify. All of our support packages are going to have a branch, which is the ransomware response team. So anytime ransomware is whispered, you get essentially a Tiger team that comes on and helps you with the recovery. And this is what they do every day. They're always involved in ransomware response. And we've also just formulated what's called a Rubric Zero Labs. This is where we get data intelligence related to ransomware, malware infection. And this is also where a lot of our new feeds are going to come from for detecting malware in a more automated way, which you'll see coming here later on in the year as well. And then the last thing I'll leave you with is really just more of a brag here, but they did just release the Gartner Magic Quadrant for data protection, and Rubric once again is farthest to the right in terms of vision, and we're for the 4th year in a row a leader within that Magic Quadrant itself. So keep that in mind. If you have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out. Aside from that, that kind of wraps up the presentation here for me. I'll kind of kick it back over to the poll.
Thanks, Danny. I appreciate that. What a great presentation. And you, as you've said, you've got our poll up for you. And this is now our turn to ask all of you a question. What we're wondering is what additional information you would like to get about the Rubric solution. So obviously, Danny just gave us an awesome intro, and there's lots more to dig into. So what would be helpful for you? Basically, make your future self, click the easy button for your future self, because Rubric's just going to hand it right to you, exactly what you need, to make sure that you've got that. While you guys are clicking on that poll, Danny and I are going to dig into some questions. Danny, you ready to get into some audience Q&A here?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I want to start with this one because we've had a couple of sessions lately that are really interested in this kind of cybersecurity approach, and sensitive data always comes up. So does Rubric sensitive data tool allow me to see if that data is actually getting exfiltrated?
Yeah, good question. So as it stands today, the tool is going to tell you where the sensitive data lives all the way down to the file system, to the actual file itself, and exactly what type of sensitive data that was. So we can categorize it, was it HIPAA data? Was it CGIS data? Was it personally identifiable information, PCI, and we'll be able to detect based off of the other tools in place, such as ransomware, investigation, and threat hunting, essentially if that attacker had access to it. So if they had access to it and they were kind of lurking there in the file system, you can make a pretty good guess as to whether or not they were able to exfiltrate it. Now, can we say for sure if they exfiltrated or not? Not yet. But we did just make a very exciting acquisition, which is going to put us in a much better place to be able to make those determinations. So if you want to know more about that, we did just make a pretty big acquisition, a company called Laminar. They're leaders in the data posture management platform. It's going to be an exciting thing, and it's going to give us a lot more tools in place to tell us about our sensitive data and how best to manage it.
Danny, you're dropping a lot of cool news on us today, and that actually connects in. You segued nicely and unintentionally to our next question, because one of the things you were talking about was some of the upcoming compliance that folks can expect, and compliance obviously top of mind, especially when we're looking at public sector and education, right? So wanting to clarify a little bit here, we've got a question: when will Rubric be CGIS compliant, or excuse me, CJIS compliant for cities and countries that work with FBI data?
So that's actually here today. That's the first step to RSCG. That's the first thing. I mean, our largest install base is with cities and counties. Obviously we work with state governments as well as federal governments, as you saw with that second to last slide. But CGIS compliance is already here. It just requires the RSCG, which, like I said, has all of those compliance standards in place related to personnel that work at the data centers, how we protect your M365 cloud data, how we archive out to our proprietary cloud, and not to mention everything else related to CGIS compliance. So yeah, it's here already. Sorry, I probably should have mentioned that a little more clearly in the previous slide. But yeah, good question.
No, that's great. We've got everyone's paying attention. They're on it. Okay, we're running a little short on time, but I'm going to sneak in one more question for you, Danny. Does the threat hunting tool, is that actually scanning my production data? And follow-up question to that: will it replace my endpoint or XDR solution?
Good question. Because a lot of times our marketing can make it seem like we're a replacement for your XDR, your CrowdStrike, but I would say no, we're not. Right? We are backend protection. It is not scanning production data, but that's a great thing about what we do. Right? We are not taxing the production environment at all. And we are only scanning the backend environment to help you with a recovery effort. To understand where you are, where you sit, and how you do the best, most effective recovery. And that basically means two things: lose the least amount of data, get back up and running as fast as possible so you don't have to pay a ransom. So great question. But yeah, ransomware monitoring, and I believe that's what it will be soon. It will be much more automated process. But as it stands today, note, we are not in your production environment. We're air gapped from that. We're only doing backup scanning.
Okay, Danny, I want to ask you one last question before you leave us here. I'm wondering, there's a lot of information that we've got today. There's a great handout, by the way, from Rubric. There's a data sheet on Rubric Security Cloud with specific focus on government and looking at those public sector risks and recovery. So that's in that handouts tab for you. So Rubric has tons of great resources and information. Danny, for somebody that is wanting to get more information or wanting to kind of figure out if this is the right solution for them, what would you suggest is the best way to kind of get started with that conversation?
Great question. So there are ways that you can get in touch with anyone from our team via rubric.com. I would say specifically to understand a little more about whether or not Rubric is going to be right for you, we've got what's called a Data Security Summit coming up here in September, mid-September or so. If you need something sooner than that, just go to rubric.com. You'll be able to click on learn more and find out exactly how someone can get in touch with you. That way we can better help you scope, explain, and see what's going to be a good fit for you. But I would definitely advise registering for that Data Security Summit coming up here, and it's September 13th, 2023. So coming up in just over a month.
Oh Lord, yeah. How it's almost September already is beyond me. Danny, thank you so much for this presentation. And I want to tell you, you've got a bunch of high fives coming in from the audience. I know that this was really interesting for everyone out there. We do have some questions that we didn't get to. Now, for anyone that asks a question today that we don't get to, don't worry. We're going to make sure that Rubric and Sophos, that our team's here with us today, get all those questions after we wrap. So you will get follow-ups from Rubric and from Danny after we wrap here. So keep those questions coming in. Danny, thank you again so much for joining us here today. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you, Jess. Much appreciated. Thanks, everybody, for your time. Y'all have a good one.
All right, and to everyone out there who clicked on a poll, keep that up. Thank you. I'm going to leave that open a little bit longer, give you another chance to click on the options that are best for you. While you're doing that, I'm going to give away a prize. So we are going to give away a $300 Amazon gift card. Now, a quick reminder that you do need to be here live and present with us at the EcoCast in order to win. So our first winner of a $300 Amazon gift card is Sumaya Verikumancherry of California. That's Sumaya Verikumancherry of California. Congratulations to you, Sumaya. As always, we will be in touch about claiming your prize after the webinar. Now, I do want to remind you, I don't want to remind you, I will not remind you that there are more chances to win a $300 Amazon gift card coming up. So stay tuned for that. Plus, we do have that best question gift card from each one of our sessions. So keep those questions coming in. Speaking of questions, I have something a little bit different for all of you right now. So Actual Tech Media is developing its 2024 webinar schedule. We're looking ahead and thinking about the topics that you are all interested in talking about when we head into this next year. We do over 100 plus events every month. So lots and lots of events coming your way. And we want to make sure that we are getting the topics that you want, the topics that you need for your journey. So if you can take a moment right now, head over to that questions tab. If you haven't already, it's on the screen for you. It's right next to the handouts tab, and just post. It can be a one-word answer. It can be security. It can be storage. It can be more detailed. You can say, I really want to dig into education specific. I want to talk about ransomware, or I never want to talk about ransomware. Whatever it is, if you just give us a little idea of what you're interested in, it can be, I want to hear innovations. I want to hear, I don't know, now I'm just making things up. Star Wars. We had a great Star Wars day on May the 4th. Whatever it is that you have in mind, let us know, because then we will make sure that those are the topics that we're bringing to you. Those are the vendors that we're connecting with and making sure that we're getting you the information that you need. So take a minute right now. This is how you're going to make sure that we're getting you the right information, and post in the questions tab. We are seeing those come in, so we can make sure we're getting that info. Anyways, I'm just going to leave that up for a second longer and give you guys a chance. If you come up with other things later on, please do add them in at any time. If you just say, I'd like to hear about this, so we can differentiate that from a question that's coming in, that'd be great. Otherwise, I'm just going to be asking Sophos a bunch of one-word questions. All right, so thank you. I see some great answers coming in. I want to thank all of you who are taking the time to fill that out. This is so helpful for us and making sure that we're getting you the right information. Okay, I am going to move things along, but as I said, keep those answers coming in. If you have topics that come to mind in just a little bit here, feel free to enter them in at any time, and we will make sure that they get logged into our data collection here. Who doesn't love a good data collection report? Speaking of data, we have a very exciting next session, and I am going to jump on over to that. Now, the best part about these shorter EcoCasts is that they're just kind of go, right? They're full of exciting info and cool takeaways in a short period of time. And so here we are, already at our very last presentation of the day, our grand finale, and I am so excited to introduce you all to Sally Adams, Senior Director of Marketing at Sophos. Sally, I want to thank you very much for being here with us to bring us on home today. I'm really looking forward to your presentation because those of us around public sector education, you all know the importance of good resources, of good data and reporting. And Sally, you're going to walk us through some really interesting data from a recent Sophos report, and I cannot wait to hear more about it. So on that note, I will step back and hand things over. Take it away, Sally.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. I'm going to be sharing the findings of an exclusive study that reveals the prevalence, the root cause, the cost, and the impact of ransomware. And we're going to take a look at how different industries and different countries stack up. And we're going to look at some historical trends leveraging our surveys from previous years. In terms of the research, well, we commissioned an independent survey of 3,000 leaders responsible for IT and cybersecurity across 14 countries. All respondents were from organizations with between 100 and 5,000 employees, and we had a full range of company revenue splits from less than $10 million to over $5 billion. The research was conducted between January and March 2023, and we asked the respondents to share their experiences of ransomware over the previous 12 months. Let's now start looking at the findings. And the first headline is that the percentage of organizations hit by ransomware in the last years remained level, as 66% of respondents said their organization experienced an attack, the same as in our 2022 survey. In the last year, there's been a step change in the cybercrime business model, particularly the growth of the as-a-service model, such as ransomware as a service. And this has lowered the barriers to entry for would-be attackers, and it's also increased the quality of the attacks. And with ransomware attacks continuing at this level for a second year, it's clear that adversaries are able to consistently execute attacks at scale. When we split the ransomware attack rate data by sector, we can see that education reported the highest rates of ransomware attacks of all industries that we surveyed in 2023. Lower education, so K-12, primary, secondary, elementary, high schools, essentially those that cater for under 18s, they reported 80% of attacks. So 80% of organizations had experienced an attack in the previous year, whilst in higher education, it was 79%. So education in the top two positions in terms of the frequency of experiencing a ransomware attack. Now, education has traditionally struggled with resourcing and budgets for cybersecurity, and it's likely that adversaries are targeting this sector because they know it's less well defended. And because of the resource shortages, human and technological, education can struggle to reduce the attack surface and threat exposure. So when adversaries hunt for exposed organizations, for example, they're scanning the web to find open connections, they're more likely to come across education providers. And also the shortages mean that education is often less well equipped to automatically block an attack when it does come. It's interesting to see that IT, telecoms and technology reported the lowest rate of attack, far over on the right side of the chart. This is a sector that is traditionally well funded, well equipped for cybersecurity. They've got strong defenses and can reduce their risk and exposure and defend well against attacks. As a result, they've got a ransomware attack rate that's considerably below average, coming in at 50%. Let's now take a look at how those attacks started, the root cause. And this chart here shows the root cause of attack across the 1,974 organizations that had experienced a ransomware incident last year. Top of the list is exploited vulnerabilities, the most common root cause reported in 36% of incidents, followed pretty closely by compromised credentials, which was the root cause of 29% of those ransomware attacks. Now, these findings align almost exactly with the findings from Sophos' retrospective analysis of 152 ransomware incidents that our incident responders were brought in to remediate. In our internal analysis, 37% started with exploited vulnerabilities, 30% with compromised credentials. So two very different data sources, two very similar results. Email was the root cause in quite a few attacks. 18% started with malicious email and 13% started with phishing. And I'm aware, obviously, that a phishing attack could then lead to compromised credentials. So there is an interplay going on here. 3% of attacks started with brute force and just 1% with a download. here is the split of root cause of attack by industry. The numbers are quite small to get everything on the chart, but I'm hoping you can see your own sector here. Media, leisure, and entertainment reported the highest percentage of attacks where the root cause was an exploited vulnerability, with 55% saying that this was the cause. So some widespread gaps here. Central and federal government had the highest percentage of attacks that started with compromised credentials, 41%. Now, this may be due to a higher rate of credential theft in this sector. It may be a lower ability to prevent exploitation of stolen credentials, or a combination of the two. It's interesting to have a look at the well-resourced IT technology and telecom sector in the middle of the chart. We can see that they've really reduced adversaries' ability to exploit vulnerabilities and credentials, with only 22% of attacks starting with each of these approaches. As a result, over half of their ransomware incidents started with email, as adversaries are forced to focus on exploiting humans to get inside the organization. So we've looked at the attack rates, we've looked at how those attacks started. Let's now take a look at what comes next. Did the data get encrypted? So over the last 4 years, we've been asking organizations that have been hit by ransomware whether the cyber criminals succeeded in encrypting their data. This here is the responses from our 2020, 2021, and 22 surveys, when 73%, 54%, and 65% respectively said yes, their data was encrypted. So what happened this year? Well, in 2023, 76% said yes, their data was encrypted. Sadly, encryption is now at the highest ever rate. This likely reflects the ever-increasing skill level of adversaries who continue to innovate and refine their approaches. If we look at that orange bar, we can see that the percentage of extortion-only attacks with no encryption continues to decline, coming in now at just 3%. On the face of it, this is good news. But hold the thought, because we're going to dive into that in a bit more detail in a moment. I want to take a look at that data split by industry. And when we do that, we can see that almost all sectors struggle to stop attacks before data can be encrypted. With just one exception, in every sector, over 2/3 of attacks resulted in data encryption. The highest frequency of data encryption, 92% of attacks, was reported by business and professional services. IT, technology, and telecoms is again the sector that bucks the trend, with adversaries succeeding in encrypting data in fewer than half, just 47% of attacks. This is another indicator of the high level of cyber defenses and response preparation in this sector. We saw before that extortion-only attacks have dropped. As I said, on the face of it, this is good news. But when we dive deeper, we can see that there's actually a strong trend for double dipping by attackers, where they both steal data and they encrypt it. So not one or the other, but both. Of the organizations that had data encrypted, 30% said their data was also stolen. So putting that another way, in 3 in 10 successful ransomware attacks, data was stolen as well as encrypted. Stealing data gives adversaries additional opportunities to monetize the attack. In addition to trying to get a ransom payment to decrypt the data, they can sell the data or threaten to make it public unless payment is made. So we've looked at how many organizations had data encrypted. Let's now look at how many got that data back. And the good news is that 97% of organizations that had data encrypted got some data back. And given the prevalence of ransomware that we're seeing in this study, it's good to know that organizations are able to respond. Now, I should make clear, they may not have got all of their data back, but they at least got some of their data back. When it comes to how they did it, 70% used backups, 46% paid the ransom, and 2% said they used other means. Now, clearly, this adds up to more than 100%. And in fact, 21% said they used multiple methods in parallel to restore their data. So they, for example, paid the ransom and used backups as well. Looking at how those numbers compare with previous years, this chart shows ransom payment rate, which is that lighter blue line, and the backup rate, the darker blue line, for the last few years. We can see that after increasing for 2 years, the ransom payment rate has remained level at 46%. But over the last year, the use of backups has dropped down from 73% last year to 70% this year. Now, this is only a small percentage drop, but it is really concerning because backups are the best and the cheapest way to restore data. So to see any decline is really concerning. And as we go forward, I'm going to give you a lot more evidence to support the use of backups wherever possible. This chart here compares ransom payment rate and backup use across the different sectors. Again, the lighter blue is the percentage that paid the ransom. The darker blue is those that used backups. And as before, they're not mutually exclusive. As you can see, business and pro services reported the highest rate of backup use, with 90% using them to recover data. But it also reported one of the highest rates of ransom payment. So while they're using backups, they are perhaps struggling to actually be able to restore their data from those backups. And if you recall, this is the sector most likely to have data encrypted in an attack. Distribution and transport reported the lowest rate of backup use, with fewer than half using backups to restore data. And in fact, this is the only sector where more people paid the ransom than used backups. So distribution and transport, I hope those columns are switched the other way around when we run the study next year. The unfortunate title of the most frequent ransom payer goes to the central and federal government sector, where 65% that had data encrypted said they paid the ransom. Now, I was surprised by this one, but I'm not surprised that the prize for the lowest rate of ransom payment goes to IT, telecoms, and technology. They have the second highest rate of backup use, but they're also able to use those backups to get up and running. They're not being forced to pay the ransom. So clearly, really well prepared for these attacks. Changing tack for a moment, I want to look at the impact of cyber insurance. Now, cyber insurance is a hot topic, and of course, cyber defenses and cyber coverage are very closely linked. And in fact, 91% of the respondents to the study said their organization has some form of cyber insurance. So I'm looking at the impact of having cyber insurance on ransomware recovery. So the first finding from the study is that organizations with cyber insurance are considerably more likely to recover encrypted data than those without a policy. But it makes very little difference what type of policy you have, because 98% with a standalone policy and 97% with a wider insurance policy said they got some data back. In comparison, 84% without a cyber policy were able to recover encrypted data. Now, I think there's a few things behind these numbers. Firstly, cyber insurance typically requires organizations to have backups and recovery plans as conditions of coverage. So organizations with cyber coverage are better prepared to recover from an attack. Also, insurers can guide ransomware victims through the recovery process in order to optimize their outcomes. Plus, frankly, organizations with cyber insurance are more likely to pay the ransom to recover data than those without a policy. Let me dive into that last point in a little bit more detail. This slide here shows ransom payment rate based on insurance coverage. Those with a standalone policy are almost 4 times more likely to pay the ransom than those that don't have a cyber insurance policy. Also, standalone cyber insurance policy holders are much more likely to pay the ransom than those who've got a wider business insurance policy that covers cyber. So some really interesting insights here into the relationship between ransom payment and cyber insurance. Talking about ransoms, let's have a look at the actual ransom amounts, how much was paid to the adversaries. So 216 respondents shared the actual ransom paid, and the mean average comes in at just over $1.5 million, and the median was $400,000. Now, these numbers are interesting on their own, but what's particularly interesting is when we compare them with last year. While the overall propensity to pay a ransom has remained flat versus last year, again, remaining steady at 46% of respondents, the payments themselves have increased considerably in the last year. The mean payment has almost doubled, whilst the median, the most common payment, has increased 5-fold. Now, in both this year's study and last year's study, there was a broad spread of ransom payments reported. And so I want to break down the ransom payments in a bit more detail. This chart shows the 2022 payments in light blue and the 2023 payments in dark blue. And while both years had respondents at the top and the bottom of the chart, so in both years there were people who paid less than $1,000 ransom and more than $5 million in ransom, the percentage paying the bigger ransoms has increased this year. In fact, this year 40% reported paying ransoms of $1 million or more, compared to just 11% last year. And conversely, at the other end of the scale, last year, 54% of ransom payments were less than $100,000. This year, it's down to a third, 34%, so quite considerable drop. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the largest revenue organizations were most likely to pay the highest ransoms, reflecting also that adversaries will adjust the amount they will accept based on ability to pay. Now, I should say that the study didn't distinguish between payments funded internally and those funded by the insurance providers. So we've had a look at the ransom payments. Let's now take a look at the overall recovery costs, excluding the ransoms, which I think is actually the most relevant and useful number for everybody here. Now, our 2021 survey had an average recovery cost of $1.85 million. This dropped to $1.4 million last year. Want to take a guess as to what happened this year? Well, if you guessed that the recovery costs increased, you'd be right, coming in on average at 1.82 million, almost the same as in our 2021 study. I talked earlier about using backups versus ransom payments to recover data. Well, we've crunched the numbers to understand the impact that recovery method has on overall recovery costs. And I'm pleased to say, and not a little bit relieved, that whichever way you look at it, it's considerably cheaper to use backups to recover from a ransomware attack than to pay the ransom. The mean recovery cost is almost $1 million lower for those that use backups than paid the ransom. Similarly, the median recovery cost for those that use backups, $375,000, is half the cost incurred by those that paid the ransom. And I should say that these numbers are excluding any actual ransoms themselves. So if you ever needed evidence to demonstrate the financial benefits of investing in a strong backup strategy, I think this slide is it. Diving into the business impact a little further, this splits out the loss of business revenue by those who lost a lot, which is the darker blue, and those who lost a little, which is the lighter blue. Lower education and construction and property are the two sectors most likely to have lost some business and revenue overall due to the attack. But we can see that business and pro services was most likely to say they lost a lot of business and revenue. 64% said they lost a lot. If you recall, this is the sector with the highest rate of data encryption in an attack. And again, our well-prepared IT, technology and telecom sector comes out of this very well, as it's the least likely to have lost a lot of business revenue. So what stands out here for me really is that the sector most likely to have data encrypted is the one most likely to have lost a lot of business and revenue. The sector least likely to have data encrypted is the one least likely to have lost a lot of business and revenue. This is powerful evidence to show that investing in strong cyber defenses that stop adversaries before they can complete their attacks makes wise financial sense for the business. However, continuing my championing of backups, organizations that used backups to recover from the attack were able to do so more quickly than those that paid the ransom. 45% of those that used backups recovered within a week, compared with 39% of those that paid the ransom. And almost one third, so 32% that paid the ransom took over a month to recover. And that figure for those that use backups is 23%. So again, the percentage taking a longer time is much higher for those who paid the ransom. Now, that brings us to the end of the findings. To sum up, as we have seen, ransomware remains a major threat for all organizations. The attack rate globally has leveled at 66%, with attackers able to consistently execute at scale. And as they continue to evolve their attacks, they're now encrypting data more often than ever before. While the percentage of extortion-only attacks has continued to drop, the double dip, where attackers both exfiltrate and encrypt data to increase their ability to monetize the attack, is now common. Data was also stolen in 30% of attacks where it was encrypted. And the burden that ransomware is placing on organizations has increased, with ransom payments and recovery costs both up on last year. There's also strong evidence about the benefits, operational and financial, of using backups to recover data rather than paying the ransom. The worrying thing, though, is that backup use is down compared to last year. And finally, when it comes to understanding the impact organization size has on experience of ransomware, revenue is much more relevant than the number of employees. So what should you do? Well, I have three broad recommendations that I'd like to share. Firstly, continue strengthening your defensive shields, particularly against those most common attack vectors that we saw today: exploited vulnerabilities and compromised credentials. Make sure you've got security tools that defend against these attack vectors. Also, look to deploy adaptive technologies that respond automatically to an attack, disrupting adversaries and buying defenders time to respond. And look to implement 24/7 threat detection, investigation and response, whether you deliver it in-house or in partnership with a specialist managed detection and response MDR provider. Optimize your attack preparation. It's not just about planning, it's about preparation too. This means taking regular backups, practicing recovering from those backups, and maintaining an up-to-date incident response plan that's printed out and in hard copy. So if an adversary does encrypt your files, you can still access your incident response plan. And continue to maintain good security hygiene. Timely patching and regularly reviewing your security tool configuration is as important as ever. Now, I'd like to touch just briefly on a couple of areas where Sophos can really help you elevate your defenses. Please do speak to our team to learn more about any of them. Sophos offers a full portfolio of advanced cybersecurity solutions for any environment. We secure over 550,000 organizations around the globe. Our security controls include endpoint network, email, and cloud solutions. And Sophos MDR provides 24/7 threat detection and response for Sophos and non-Sophos environments. We use the Sophos XDR platform to do this, and the platform is also available for organizations to use in-house as well. And we continue to work to enhance outcomes through automation, AI, and deep threat intelligence. Everything's available from one provider, all managed through a single cloud-based platform, and all designed to fit into your existing IT environment. So that's the portfolio. Let me dive quickly into three specific solutions to help mitigate the ransomware risk that we've looked at today. Your endpoint security is the foundation for your ransomware defenses, and Sophos Endpoint includes multiple techniques to block ransomware, including web protection, machine learning, and anti-exploitation. Sophos's anti-ransomware capabilities focus on the signs of encryption, irrespective of the source, meaning it is highly successful at stopping new variants or never-before-seen ransomware. And because it is looking for encryption behavior, it can even block encryption attempts from remote machines. Sophos Endpoint also has an automatic rollback mechanism, reverting files encrypted at the start of an attack to their original unencrypted state. And it uses proprietary technology rather than volume shadow copy, making it much more resilient to attackers who delete backups before launching their attacks. Now, we saw that exploited vulnerabilities was the most common root cause of attack, and Sophos Endpoint is particularly strong in this area. Enabled by default, Sophos's 60 anti-exploitation capabilities instantly protect devices from the moment of installation. There's no configuration required, no training, no fine-tuning, and these features build upon the 7 related capabilities that are enabled by Windows by default. Now, stopping today's sophisticated, well-funded adversaries requires powerful technology and 24/7 expert monitoring to identify and stop advanced human-led attacks that technology alone cannot prevent. Sophos MDR is the world's most trusted and highest rated MDR service. We secure more organizations than any other provider, giving us deep insights into each industry segment. This also allows us to apply community immunity. So we take learnings from defending one customer and apply them automatically to all others with a similar profile. Sophos MDR is designed to meet you where you are, working with Sophos tools and with third-party tools. You don't need to be running Sophos Endpoint to benefit from our MDR service. Everybody can. And finally, I'd like to highlight ZTNA, Zero Trust Network Access, in the fight against ransomware. ZTNA provides better protection from ransomware than traditional VPN technologies. It both prevents adversaries gaining entry to your network and stops them moving laterally. We saw that exploited vulnerabilities was the top root cause of ransomware attacks. ZTNA removes vulnerable remote access VPN infrastructure, both client and server side, greatly reducing the surface area of attack. Compromised credentials was the second most common ransomware attack vector, and multi-factor authentication is a fundamental component of ZTNA, which eliminates the possibility of attackers using compromised credentials to gain access to network resources. ZTNA also enforces device compliance and health before enabling a connection, which means a compromised host has no way to connect into the network. And finally, ZTNA only connects users to specific applications, not the whole network, providing no way for a rogue user or attacker to move laterally within the network. So that brings us to the end of this webinar. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. I hope you found it useful and interesting and have gained some insights to help you in securing your organization against ransomware. To download our State of Ransomware 2023 report, visit sophos.com/ransomware 2023. And if you'd like to discuss elevating your ransomware defenses, don't hesitate to reach out to the Sophos team. So with that, I'm going to wish you all a very happy and very successful rest of your day. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sally. What a great note to end on there. I really appreciate you walking us through that report. So many cool data points and some great takeaways for all of us. I want to point out that we have that poll question up for all of you there. We would love to get your feedback on any additional resources you would like to explore from Sophos. There is a lot to dig into and lots more to learn. So take a minute now, click on that poll, make your life easy. Let Sophos send you exactly what you need. Now, if you want that report that Sally just walked us through, it is available for you in the Handouts tab. The Sophos State of Ransomware 2023 report is right there for you to download and kind of dig in a little bit further. So please do that. I know, it's sometimes hard on screens, on slides. You're looking at data that's very, very small. So if you want to see that a little bit larger and on your own time, make sure you've downloaded that handout and look back through it as soon as we wrap. I do want to say I saw a couple of high fives coming in from the audience out there. I totally agree. A really interesting presentation, really interesting report. Love seeing all of those questions and comments come in. I know that we are moving right along. We unfortunately have to wrap up our EcoCast here today, but we are going to make sure that Sally and Sophos get all of the questions that you've just asked. So we will make sure that you get some answers back. So please do keep those questions coming in because you will get responses back to them. Now, while you're getting those last questions in, while you're clicking on the poll, I am going to give away our last two $300 Amazon gift cards. Now, a quick reminder that you all must be present here live at the EcoCast in order to win. But, as I always say, where else would you want to be, right? You're exactly where you should be today. All right, so $300 Amazon gift card going to Michael Schnabel of Texas. Michael Schnabel of Texas. And another $300 gift card going to Juliana Burgarinovic of Missouri. You have won a $300 Amazon gift card as well. I'm going to read that whole list again. That is Sumaya Verikumancheri of California, Michael Schnabel of Texas, and Juliana Barganovic of Missouri. Congratulations on your $300 Amazon gift cards. We will follow up with you after we wrap. Also, stay tuned for the Best Question gift card. We will be reviewing all of those after we wrap up and make sure that we follow up with those winners. So you will hear back from us there. And let's see, I think that's all the housekeeping things. That means we can move into our wrap up here, which means that it is time to remind you all that if you have something that you would like to come and talk to us about on an EcoCast, a Megacast, a webinar, you want to present a solution that you think would benefit your community, we would love to help you tell that story. So shoot us a message at connect@actualtechmedia.com. Scott, David, myself, Keith, we're all here and happy to talk to you. So let's get that rolling. And with that, speaking of the whole team, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media crew, I want to thank all of our speakers here with us today from Rubric and from Sophos for making this EcoCast possible. And a special, and as always, our biggest thank you going to all of you for attending. As Sally said, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come and join in this conversation, to explore some of these ransomware points that are really specific to you in your industry. I'm hoping that you were able to get some good insights and maybe some strategic approaches, maybe some ideas that you hadn't had on your mind, or maybe just kind of reaffirming directions that you're already going in. Obviously, there's lots to this conversation. Ransomware is a big and ever-growing topic and constantly evolving, which means we have to keep touching back in with these points here, right? We have to keep checking in on the newest solutions and checking in on those strategies and make sure that we are updating and evolving along with that threat, along with that conversation. So that is why we're here today, and I'm so glad that you were able to join in for that. So I hope that it's been a productive time for you, but most of all, I hope it's been enjoyable and engaging as well. Now, before you take off, I hope that you will join us again at the EcoCast Data Center versus Cloud versus Colo, why to consider, how to choose, and how to move. That's Tuesday, August 15th. At 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Again, Tuesday, August 15th, 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. In EcoCast on data centers, we're going to talk about, as you see on the screen, data center, cloud, colo. But what I like about it is that we're going to walk all the way through the process, why you should be thinking about these options, how you choose the right option for you, and then how you actually implement and take action on it. So we're kind of walking you through from ideation through to deliverables, and that's a really cool process. So be sure you come and join us for that EcoCast. Well, until then, I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you again for joining us, and I can't wait to see you again soon.